If you raised a child in isolation, would a language emerge? Make the experiment fair. You're going to have to nurture him in every way that you would normally nurture a child, but one. The one being, we're going to deny him all access to language. What if you raise two children this way to see if they form a language together? And how do you run that experiment? Now, what if the government takes 50 deaf children and puts them all together? They nurture you, do everything they would for any other child, and they try to give you access to Spanish, but they can't because of your disability. They just ran the experiment.
The streets of Nicaragua may be full of salesmen's cries in the market, reggaeton verses booming from a heavy-bassed speaker, and voices all around conversing and communicating. The streets are full of language, but you can't hear every language. In this episode of Language Stories, we explore Nicaraguan Sign Language.
Nicaragua tiene un porcentaje alto de discapacidad.
Sí.
Y tiene una lógica. Hace solo 40 años hemos tenido una guerra. La guerra produjo infinidad de desastres. Después de la guerra fue peor, porque hubo hambre. Tuvimos la contrarrevolución, fue un periodo ya demasiado largo de guerra, bloqueo económico, entonces hubo desnutrición severa. Muchos de estos niños que fueron tratados con medicamentos soviéticos, etcétera, medicamentos que hoy no se utilizarían, seguramente les salvó de morir de desnutrición, pero estos medicamentos afectaron mucho a los oídos. Por eso la mayor proporción de sordos que tenemos están entre los 20 y los 35 años. Son los niños de la posguerra.
To find out more, we spoke with James Shepherd Kegel from Nicaraguan Sign Language Projects.
After the revolution, the new government embarked, we would say in English, would be a literacy crusade. And the goal was to really make the entire population literate. This included people who were not native in speaking English. They also said, let's bring in deaf people. You have now classes where that class is geared for deaf kids. Okay? That said, it was still an oral methodology, focusing on speech-driven language.
Okay.
So that's where you're trying to teach deaf children to read lips. So the language modality would be whatever the official speech-driven language is. So in Nicaragua's case, that would be Spanish. They worked real hard on it. They were not successful. And as is traditional in oral educational programs, sign language is prohibited. So that to the extent that the children may have been trying to gesture with each other, that would have been viewed as a distraction in the class. What they were not discouraged from doing was gesturing to each other during non-school time. Recess.
So still in school, but not in the classroom.
Okay. Also, this was a day school.
Okay.
It's not a boarding school.
Right.
Which means these children have to get there. Which means every morning all these children are getting on the bus together. And that's not just the children in the primary school, that's the adolescents as well. Okay, so they're all coming together on the bus, and in the afternoons, school's out, they're all coming home together. So these children had lots of contact with each other. And the language, we think, emerged during these periods of unregulated contact.
Back in Granada, and we took a visit to Café de las Sonrisas, a cafe started by Antonio Prieto Buñuel, staffed entirely by members of the deaf and hard of hearing community in the city.
Yo me di cuenta cuando comenzamos a trabajar con personal sordo. La entrada era a las 6:30 de la mañana, en el café, el taller más tarde. Ellos llegaban 1 hora antes y se iban 1 hora y media después. Yo no lo entendía. Yo les decía, ¿qué no te quiere en tu casa? Lo decía de broma. Claro, me di cuenta, aquí era en el único sitio donde ellos estaban en un entorno donde se comunicaban. cuando llegaban a casa se quedaban así. ¿Por qué iban a la pulpería, a la tienda a comprar? Ya está. Con los vecinos, con la gente en la calle. No se comunican con nadie. Entonces, su único entorno era aquí porque estaban protegidos, podían comunicarse entre ellos.
Because presumably they would go home and they'd be away from all these other children who they could communicate with, and then they just wouldn't be able to communicate, I imagine, right?
The first problem the child had in the home was that the Spanish in Nicaragua, the Spanish around him was not accessible. That's because of the disability. Because of that, his parents end up doing communication for him. So now he has not only does he lack accessibility, he doesn't have necessity anymore either. When they took him, put him in a school where you had other deaf children, okay? These children still had the natural or innate ability to start generating language with rules. They didn't have accessibility to the hearing people around them. They did have accessibility to each other.
Yes.
They're also in an academic environment, which means they're being challenged with new information all the time. That's stimulating. So these children now have something to talk about and a need, at least on the bus or in recess, when they're just on their own between themselves, among themselves, they have a need to communicate to each other. Mm-hmm. And because they're gesturing, which is accessible, well, now you have accessibility and necessity. And you also have the innate ability to do it, to invent language, just like you had the innate ability to invent a language. Yeah. You just ended up always adapting it to the language around you. By 86, a lot of these children clearly were communicating with each other with their hands, even though the teachers, the administrators knew nothing about sign language or sign languages, right? And there was no attempt to get these children to sign. But they could clearly see during recess that these kids were communicating with each other.
After a number of years documenting the deaf community and use of sign language in various parts of Nicaragua, James and his wife Judy were invited to visit Bluefields, a town on the Caribbean coast with a population of under 100,000 and an already growing deaf community by the time they arrived. Parents had already started to document their deaf children and signing, so James and Judy wanted to help take things further.
We coordinated with the Deaf Association in Managua, including the president of the Deaf Association, who was a young deaf man who was, of course, sign language fluent. And he met with these parents and said, I'll bet you had no idea that deaf people could communicate like I do, you know? I'll bet you had very limited expectations for your own children, but it need not be that way. Oh. And the parents then asked us to introduce Nicaraguan Sign Language to the community. We ran this immersion program where we just were all in the same room all day long with 2 sign language role models. And that, over time, evolved into an academic program, which ultimately became a full school with a calendar year, you know, and full academics and whatnot.
But huge progress like this isn't always easy. When Antonio first shared his idea to open Café de las Sonrisas, it was met with some skepticism.
Sí. Cuando yo dije voy a abrir Café de las Sonrisas, la gente dijo que estaba loco. La gente no confió en el proyecto. Entiendo que hay turistas que llegan, quiero un café. Y los chicos le dicen, no escucho, compa. Y hacen, como, no, pero al momento hacen, y se van enamorados. Sí. Pero lo bonito es que un día no sea sorpresa, que tú entres, es divertido porque a veces me escriben, tío Antonio, ¿cuánto cobra por ayudar para hacer tal? Creo que te equivocaste de pregunta. La pregunta es, tío Antonio, ¿nos puede ayudar? Queremos hacer esto, yo voy a estar a vuestro lado. No somos McDonald's, no somos Starbucks, somos el Café de las Sonrisas. Cópiennos, háganlo, lo importante es que lo hagan.
The story of Nicaraguan Sign Language is fascinating. A language emerging accidentally during such a tumultuous time for a country? You couldn't make this up. To have spoken with Antonio and James and learn of the positive things today being done to support the growth of this language has been an unforgettable experience. This is the penultimate episode of the series of language stories. If you've enjoyed this, then you are sure to enjoy the sister podcast to this episode and to the entire series. Just search language stories wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have a language story that you'd love to share, or you know someone that does, get in touch. Contact details are in the description below. And of course, remember to subscribe here on YouTube for regular language learning videos as well as language stories. I'll see you very soon. Thank you. Bye.